Labour MPs and others tweeting and some of the media urging me not to attend tonight because Jackie Walker was on the platform. My response is to be here. Simple as well. I want to talk through where we're at in the campaign with regard to Jeremy's leadership and where we go from here on, because we've got 9 days left of the campaign itself. And it's 9 days. I'm concerned there's an element of complacency, that people think we've won the campaign already, that the votes have been cast, and somehow we're just going to walk it. I never actually predict an election before the results are announced. And I think what we've got to do now is make sure every vote is harvested over this next 9 days, and then we prepare the ground for what comes after. Because this next 9 days is possibly the most serious we've got to confront, and the period after that exactly the same. But it's important we understand what we're up against, because what this is, as you know, what we've experienced recently in this last few months is just a very British coup. And it started not on the weekend after Brexit. It started 2 minutes into Jeremy's acceptance speech. Because if some of you remember, just as he was making that speech, across the bottom of the screen were shadow cabinet members announcing that they were resigning and refusing to serve. Within 2 minutes of him actually opening his mouth to thank people for voting for him. And the plot went on from there. Jeremy did what other Labour leaders have done throughout our party's history, which is construct a shadow cabinet of left, right and centre, and to try to bring the whole of the Parliamentary Labour Party together, reconnect it with the grassroots of our membership to reflect, to be frank, our political tradition. I know some of you were more anxious that the left took absolute control of the shadow cabinet. It was unrealistic. What was meant was to reflect the broad church of our party. And actually, in many ways, if you look at the successes we've had in the past, that's the way in which we've succeeded, bringing that broad church together, winning the arguments from the left about the development of socialism in this country, and pulling the right onto our territory. And that is how we've succeeded. And that was exactly the strategy that Jeremy pursued. But there was a hardened group of people within the Parliamentary Labour Party that were never ever going to come to terms with his election as leader or his mandate, except his mandate, which, as you know, is the biggest mandate any political leader has had from the rank and file of their party in the history of this country. And so the plot was, as you know, as soon as we lost electorally, they would trigger an attempt at a coup. And the first attempt was meant to be at the Oldham by-election. The only problem is, and I'm under constraints about the language I use from Jeremy now, is that they're useless. Because we won the Oldham by-election, and we won it with an increased majority. And the way we won it was interesting. Because what we did is we combined a traditional Labour local candidate, centre-left, with the enthusiasm that Jeremy generated through his campaign, all those Corbynistas, and actually coached loads of momentum supporters bust into the constituency. And we get the best of both worlds. It was almost that broad church approach won us that by-election. So the plotters then held back, and the next opportunity was meant to be when we lost the mayoral elections and had disasters in the local elections. Now, here's a funny thing, we won every mayoral election. And we matched Ed Miliband's results in terms of local council elections at its highest when the recession was at its deepest. And it wasn't just London, winning London, that was important to us. One of the most important wins for me was Marvin Rees in Bristol, a black man winning in a city that made its money out of the slave trade 2 centuries ago. Huge win. In terms of the politics of it as well as the electoral success. So the next opportunity was the European referendum. Way back in September, Jeremy and I met with Angela Regal and Hilary Benn, and we basically said, if you want to run the referendum campaign, by all means. They brought in Alan Johnson to run it. But our concerns were that if you go on a purely Europhile platform, it won't work. It might work in some areas, but it certainly won't work up north and elsewhere. And you've got to have a balanced approach, which is, yes, remain, but reform. You've got to go along with the reform agenda and convince people that we're offering a way in which we address some of the perceived concerns that people had about the EU. And we were attacked from the left in terms of because of the treatment of the EU of Greece. So I got Yanis Varoufakis, and he toured around with us on the country to argue, yes, we know what the European Union has done in terms of the Greek economy and the Greek people, but still remain in because there's alliances that we form. And we toured around the country, and I absolutely resent the argument that Jeremy didn't work hard enough. He put in thousands of miles doing meeting after meeting all around the country. And if you look at the appearances and all the rest of it, he tops it in terms of the Labour campaign. But we lost, and I think we lost for a number of reasons. One, because I don't think the campaign did take the theme of Remain and Reform. I actually think as well a lot of the claims were exaggerated and people stopped believing in anything that was said. But I think more importantly than that, we advised from the beginning, as soon as you appear on a platform with the Tories, you are then the establishment. And we said to them, have you learnt nothing from the Scottish referendum? And I resented the ability of Farage and Boris Johnson and others to try and claim that we were all part of the Westminster bubble. And I tell you, doing those meetings in northern towns with regard to the European referendum was tough, because it was like a by-election where everybody's grievances poured into one vote. And we offered very little, to be frank, in addressing those grievances. And it was a historical grievance of a generation at least, of towns and individuals who felt left behind and no one was listening to them. And by appearing with the Tories, that's how we became epitomised as well by them. So we lost. So that weekend, they seized their opportunity. And on the Saturday, some of you will know, we got the phone call from the Observer journalist about 5:30 on the Saturday, saying that Hilary Benn was phoning round members of the Shadow Cabinet urging them to resign. Jeremy tried to track down Hilary, who eventually got hold of him by midnight. And Jeremy, I tell you, care, compassion, someone who actually takes knocks and yet still comes back and tries to achieve, I suppose, overcoming conflict and resolving conflict, asked Hilary to withdraw, stay in the Shadow Cabinet. They'll issue a joint statement between them to resolve the matter. And Hilary refused, and Jeremy had no option but to sack him. What we didn't know is that there had been a plan. I didn't know the details of the plan, although actually their meetings were being leaked to us all fairly regularly anyway. We had people in the meetings letting us know what was going on. That's why they were useless. What we didn't fully know is that basically the idea is that they resign hour by hour in small batches to destabilise Jeremy by the next morning. So literally we were getting fed through announcements from the media, another 4 had gone, another 4 had gone an hour later, another 4 had gone. The idea was by lunchtime that Monday, that Jeremy would be so crushed he would resign. They completely underestimate the This isn't this image of a man of steel or something like this. This isn't about some of them are portrayed as some vanity project, I guess, to stay in position on the rest of it. This is someone, as a result of absolute commitment to principle, that he was not going to basically allow them to undermine the democratic decisions of the party, and at the same time he was not willing to walk away and desert us, basically. And that's why he stuck it out. And within 24 hours he appointed another shadow cabinet. And I tell you, they're the heroes and heroines of this movement. I can say this now, I'm 65. These young people who've now come forward in the shadow cabinet are absolute heroes and heroines. And they're brilliant. Becky Long-Bailey, the Chief Secretary, absolutely brilliant. In the middle, she takes over the dealing of a finance bill mid-session. The finance bill, Simeon's here, Simeon Andrews, who's a parliamentary consultant for the Union and all that. He'll tell you the finance bill is the most complicated bill in parliamentary history that you can deal with. She takes it over halfway through. The number 3 in our team resigns on camera in committee. Texts me whilst I'm on the front bench, I'm resigning, and he does it on camera in committee. She steps forward and takes over. He wiped all the data off our computers, so that we never even had the amendments ready for the next day. We worked through the night with our team, and she completes the finance bill over the next couple of weeks. The opposition parties, the Tories and Libs who were on the committee, at the end of it, had to get up and applaud her for the work that she did. Incredible. Richard Bergen comes forward, Cat Smith, Clive Lewis. This is the new generation that's been brought forward, stepping into the breach when we need them. Heroes and heroines of our movement that we should acknowledge what they've done. And to be and it's taught me a lot of lessons about slimmed down government. What we've done since then, we've operated as an effective parliamentary opposition. It has been tough covering all the bases. People have worked double, they've taken on double briefs, etc., and they've worked incredibly hard. Now, I think you need to realise that, because all through that period as well, they've suffered, and Ronnie said about the trolls and all the rest of it, they've suffered all that abuse too. And they've suffered it from our own backbenches, the criticisms, etc. All that sort of pressure that's put upon them, because the Parliament is like a total institution where those sorts of pressures build up, and at times it's been more like Lord of the Flies, quite honestly, than something you'd expect in a modern parliamentary system. But they've held together, and I think they've done incredibly well. And we've reached the summer recess, and we're back there now dealing with the parliamentary business. This was never about the arguments they put forward. They argued that it was about Jeremy not being able to win elections. Well, as I said, we won the mayor elections. We won every parliamentary by-election. That's put in front of us. 3 out of 4, we increased our majorities. We won the council elections. The irony of it is the worst parliamentary Labour Party meeting I've ever been to, when they were calling upon Jeremy to stand down. You're a nice bloke, but you need to stand down, and got really aggressive. The first item on that agenda, they were all going, you can't win elections. The first item on that agenda was welcoming the tooting candidate who just tripled their majority in the parliamentary by-election. The irony of it went past most of them. It was extraordinary. And then this argument that he's not strong enough to be a leader. Well, he's a different type of leader. I don't want to go back to a Blair or a Brown, the big fist. I don't want to go back to a Prime Minister or a Labour Party leader that ignores the rank and file. Why don't I want to go back there? Because they make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes cost lives. 500,000 lives in the war in Iraq as a result of the type of... The whole purpose of Jeremy becoming leader is to take the power and give that power away, so that we're all empowered. So it isn't one leader, we're all leaders in this movement. But be clear, this has nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn as an individual. This is about you. This is the establishment saying to you, how dare you elect a socialist as the leader of the Labour Party? This is the 1% telling the 99% to get back in line, get back in your box. Because what they want is to go back to what they used to. Is a Labour Party leader that might speak big in terms of policies, but is easily incorporated, very easily incorporated, because that's what they used to in recent years. They want to get back to a politics which is simply a rotation of the political elites cut off from the real world, but dominated largely by the City of London and big finance and capital. That's why Jeremy is such a challenge to them. It's about transforming the system, redistributing wealth and power, and then ensuring that we create a new society. That frightens the establishment. So they're throwing everything out at us. And it isn't just the establishment in the City of London or Tories, it's part of the establishment within our own political party as well. So what do we do about it? Well, it's straightforward, isn't it? We make sure, in this next 10 days, we make sure that all those votes are mobilised. And yes, they're throwing everything at us. The purge, they said there's 3,000 members that have been purged. I think it's much more than that, to be honest. They think there's about 20-odd thousand others who haven't received their ballot paper. They're still checking whether they're on the electoral register, etc. I think that's much more as well. Liz Davis has set up a website, Why Can't I Vote? She's been inundated by people contacting her. So we're taking up individual cases, like Ronnie's and the others. I pay tribute to her. Solicitors like Liz Davis, Martin Howe and others have done fantastic work in getting people reinstated. But in addition to that, what they're trying to do is destroy us by the media, undermine people's confidence. We can't win elections. Denigration of individuals on a regular basis. All of us. Anyone who puts their head above the parapet, the media in this country will seek to take apart. And don't talk to me about the independence of the liberal press like The Guardian. They're as bad as some of the others. And if you look at the BBC and the research that's been done by the Greenwich University, the research that was done by the LSE about the treatment of Jeremy, they analysed the first 3 months of Jeremy's leadership, and they said basically the media has gone from being a watchdog with regard to Corbyn to an attack dog. And I don't know whether you saw it, it was on Twitter a bit again this week, but the BBC sneaked out a correction about the supposed demonstration in Walthamstow, supposedly outside an MP's home. That never took place. It was outside an office that wasn't occupied. It was led by who? Because radical revolutionaries, a local priest and a local imam. They sneak out and apologise. I got that thrown at me in an interview in the Today programme. I had no idea that they were talking about it. But it was intended to smear the left and smear Momentum and smear Jeremy's supporters. And they sneak it out on a website in July. Extraordinary. So the whole of the establishment is coming against us. What is our response? Our response in this next 9 days is to get that vote out and give Jeremy a bigger mandate than he had last year. That's if and when Jeremy wins. And I never predict the end of the results. So in 92 in Hayes, I lost by 54 votes on 4 recounts. I know every one of those people. Watch my language. So I never ever predict results. But if he does win, what we then have to do is bring the party back together again. And yes, we've been talking to members of the Parliamentary Labour Party, some of whom have signed up the vote no confidence on Jeremy, and saying, come back. Tell us what your criticisms are. If your criticisms are about our competence, tell us what that means and get involved in improving. What we want to do now is we want to set up a mechanism by which we form an alternative government, a government in waiting. So we'll appoint staff like permanent secretaries. We'll make sure every shadow cabinet member has the resources to develop the policies working with party members. Set up advisory groups for every area of policy so that people can see that we can walk into government tomorrow as soon as May goes. And if people have criticisms about our competence, we're saying to them, get involved in that process. If it's about communication, yeah, we all need to learn lessons. You're right. We do lead with our chins sometimes. Maybe throwing lead books about isn't the most appropriate way of getting a point across. So let's learn some of those lessons. But we're saying to those members of the Parliamentary Labour Party, be straight with us. Because we've all made these mistakes. Let's move on as well and get involved in that. And in that way, we're trying to build bridges and bring people back in. And we're saying to them, when they go back to their constituencies now, there's a real resource for them as well as the whole party. They've had constituency parties of 200 or 300 or 400 members. They're going back now to constituencies of 1,000 and 2,000 or 3,000 members. What a huge resource. So what we want to do now is make sure the mechanisms within the Labour Party at national and regional level responds to that resource. We set up training academies in every region to train people in how we campaign, how we develop, using social media and all the techniques, and we build up. And instead of settling back and saying we've got 500,000 members, the biggest party in Europe, we should be aiming for 1 million members. A member on every street in this community, in our country, so that we can argue the case throughout. So we want to demonstrate to them, all of them that were our critics before, that we can form a competent government, that we can develop a campaigning mechanism based upon us becoming a social movement now that can take us on a tide of popular support into government no matter what they throw at us. Now that's a huge opportunity Absolutely huge. We've not had this opportunity since the end of the Second World War and then the formation of the Attlee government. I never thought, to be frank, less than 2 years ago, I never thought I'd see a socialist elected as the leader of the Labour Party. I certainly never thought we'd actually transform the Labour Party into a mass social movement capable of transformative change within our society. Well, now we've got it. There's no excuses anymore. We've got a socialist leader, we've got a mass movement, we've got brimming over with ideas about what needs to be done, we've got the opportunity of hegemonising the debate around the issues and the policies that we need for the future. And I think there's a responsibility on all our shoulders now to seize that opportunity with both hands. And we do it in a number of ways. Yes, those organisational things. But you don't just wait. You don't just wait for an election. You don't just wait for it to happen. We also have to link up with those struggles that are going on now. So that's why on Saturday and last week I was pleased to join up with DPAC, the direct action campaigns that they're undertaking to protect disabled people against the cuts that are going on. Tonight we've had a message through from John Burgess that 46 or nearly 50% of the library workers in Barnet are actually going to be sacked. So we're going to link up with them with whatever industrial action that they take. And when the junior doctors, if they do go back out on strike again, never again should a Labour MP or a shadow cabinet member be embarrassed about being on their picket lines. I'll finish with this and say, look, thanks for all the support you've given us all the way through, because I know it's been tough for people, and sometimes you have to swim against the stream and stand up to some vitriol that we've had. And some of that, to be frank, when the truth is told and the research is undertaken, some of that, I know this sounds paranoid, some of that is very effectively organised and funded by the establishment itself to try and undermine us. But all through this now, we've stood together this far. We had a huge success last year in getting Jeremy elected. We now build on that success and getting him re-elected with a bigger mandate. And then after that, we use the struggles that we have facing us to build solidarity right the way across our movement. This is the opportunity we waited for. This is the opportunity most of us were born for. Let's seize it in solidarity.